Ramsgate Town Council has called this meeting because we do want to hear you and we do want to answer you.
I will attempt to set out the main issues relating to a number of aspects of the development for Pleasure Island site. This is because the information both in the media, on blog sites and at local meetings may not represent the current position with complete accuracy. Right, the freehold. The council currently holds the freehold for the site, but the future transfer of the freehold.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
Modern technology.
The council currently holds the freehold for the site, but the future transfer of the freehold is already part of the existing agreement with the developer, which was approved by the council in 2006. This agreement also granted the developer 3 199-year leases covering the whole of the site, granted to enable the developer to secure funding and have possession of the site for construction purposes. Following completion of the flats, commercial units and the hotel, the freehold will pass to the developer. The agreement was made against the aim to achieve value from the council's sites, as well as trying to address our top priority of generating sustainable employment. The current agreement. The 2006 agreement was subsequently revised in 2009, at which time it was secured by a bond paid by the developer, which will only be released on completion of the development. The latest discussions, the current proposals from the developer are still seeking changes to the development agreement and leases to meet requirements of their potential funders. The council's position on new proposals remains the same. 1. Completion of the development within an agreed timetable. Delivery of the full development proposal, including residential, commercial and hotel elements, as planned. Payment to the council of the agreed sums. Work on site. The developer has invested nearly £5 million in the site so far. This has funded cliff works undertaken by the council, as well as drainage and road works. In addition, this has also included foundation works completed on site and associated design works, as well as the bond payment that has been paid to the council. Funding. The developer has been seeking external funding to allow completion of the site, and this has proved very difficult since the revised agreement was signed in 2009. In the current financial climate, the banks and other lending institutions are reluctant to financially back investments that contain some of the provisions contained with the current development agreement and leases. This has been the primary cause of the developer seeking variations to these documents. The council is currently undertaking due diligence actions in relation to appraisal documentation submitted by the developer. Compliance with the agreement. The main fundamentals of the agreement have been met by the developer. Although the development is due to be completed in 2014 under the current agreement, there are provisions that this can be extended to 2017 if market circumstances dictate this, and given the existing national economic position, any such request would have to be given proper consideration. The council could decide to refuse a request for extension, taking into account the slow progress of development to date and concerns in relation to the current financial appraisal provided by the developer. However, given the amount of funds already invested, we would expect the developers to make a legal challenge to this. This would inevitably result in expensive and uncertain litigation, and the council would need to consider its chances of success in terminating the agreement against the costs of legal action. More importantly, it must be noted that even if the council was successful, there would remain the long leases which the developer holds, which would remain valid even if the agreement was terminated. It would take further legal action by the council in order to terminate those leases and recover possession of the site, the success of which would also be uncertain. These matters, which will form part of the consideration of options by the overview and scrutiny task and finish group. The overview and scrutiny committee are due to meet on 18th of July, and this is a public meeting. Right, financial return. There have been some misconceptions about the value of the site and that this has been undervalued. However, this has been looked at in some depth by the Council's professional property officers, and for a site on which all the investment cost and risk lies with the developer, the Council is getting above the market average for this type of deal.
Can you speak to us rather than take, please?
I'm reading my notes here, so I get it right. That's why I've done it. Right, financial return. I'll do this bit again. There have been some misconceptions about the value of the site, and that this has been undervalued. However, this has been looked at in some depth by the Council's professional property officers, and for a site on which all the investment cost and risk lies with the developer, the Council is getting above the market average for this type of deal, especially as it includes the construction of a hotel. Due diligence. The Council has already set out its requirements before accepting a revised agreement, and one of these is in relation to due diligence on the funding of the development. Despite concerns raised about this, the deal has always required the large majority of funding to come from external lenders, and the Council's focus will be primarily on whether this is financially robust. Financial appraisal details on the current situation have been provided recently as part of this process, and these are being assessed currently. Nature of the proposed development. The question of whether this is the correct development for the site has been raised since it was first discussed over 10 years ago. Although this is a fair question and will remain so, it does not provide a route forward for the Council at the present time. The development has a valid and enacted planning application for the proposals, and has a valid development agreement and leases under which it can be constructed if the funding is available. These cannot be set aside without legal action, and as explained above, this has limited chance of success at this stage. Despite a number of suggestions on this front, the Council cannot seek to terminate the agreement or the leases on the basis that an alternative is preferable now. This would be immediately challengeable by the developer. Action by the Council. The Council has already agreed to consider its options in relation to the current agreement and leases because the developer did not satisfy its requirements by 22nd of May. This has involved setting up the task and finish group under scrutiny to assess these options specifically, and for scrutiny to report back to Cabinet with its findings. However, as there is an existing agreement and leases with the developer, they are legally entitled to seek changes to these to allow development to proceed. And the Council need to consider these proposals in a reasonable fashion. Merely cutting off discussions, despite the developer not achieving the 22nd of May target, is not an option, as it could be challenged legally. I still believe the best way forward for all concerned, and particularly the long-suffering residents of Ramsgate, is for the developer to get on site and complete the development as soon as possible.